All right, good morning, everybody. All right, first session, first day. You all made it out, so thanks for being here. Just real quick, my name is Grant Stubblefield. A few little things I'm going to go over today are definitely forward-looking, so these are probably going to change over the next bit. I've changed this presentation 2 to 3 times in the last 3 weeks because of new things that have come out in Databricks. So just be aware it's current state of what's going on in Databricks. My name is Grant Stubblefield. I'm the director of product at Kythera Labs. Kythera Labs is a healthcare data technology company. We're based out of Nashville, Tennessee. I have personally lived there since 2000, so it's been home for a really long time. My background is primarily in healthcare. I have worked in it for about 8 years now. For a while, I was working with healthcare payers doing claims automation, a bunch of stuff with member data. If you don't know much about healthcare, then I won't go too hard into that. You're healthcare, cool. So I got my start doing RPA, which is robotic process automation, and in that role, learned a lot about how data really drives what we do from a business process standpoint. And then that got me into more of a data analytics side with healthcare data. And about 3 years ago, I moved over to Kythera, which is completely built on Databricks, and I got really into Databricks SQL, which is, to me, the greatest thing ever. It's the best syntax I've used for it. I haven't had to learn Python because of what I can do with SQL and Databricks. Personally, like I said, I live in Nashville. Music is a really big thing in my life, so I still play out a bit. If you feel like talking to me about music afterwards, cool. If you want to talk to me about data, feel free to come up. So today we're talking about what data products are, and do we all mean the same thing when we even say data products? I have read so many articles that don't really define it, or maybe define it differently, or it's different from every person you talk to. So it's a really common term that we use, but it can be different for each one of our businesses. So some characteristics of data products. These are not a comprehensive list. You may not apply all of them to your own data, but this is really the core at how I look at data from a product standpoint. So usually it's very purposeful data. It solves a real problem for a real user, usually a business issue. They're discoverable, so it's data that you really are sharing with other teams. It's not something just for you or just for internal folks. It's something that you'd either expose externally or to downstream teams. It's addressable, so by that I mean it addresses a business problem. It is uniquely there to solve some kind of problem. And it does so either through a schema. It can be a REST API, an endpoint. Really, it's kind of up to you for how it solves that problem. They are trustworthy. What do I mean by that? It means when somebody goes and looks at that table, they believe it can actually solve their answer. You don't get a bunch of questions about, hey, when was this table last created? What does it do? Is it the most up-to-date? Is it the latest and greatest? The number of times I have been asked if a table is the latest and greatest, where it's not, can sometimes blow my mind. That usually means it's not a data product, though, and people kind of would want it to be. So that actually drives a lot of what we develop as data products internally. It's self-contained, and by that I mean you're not having to do a ton of work to get the answers out of it. It could be a set of 4 or 5 tables together that you have to join, or it could be pre-joined. That's something that we do at Kythera, is a lot of the denormalization in tables, whether that be from defined views in Databricks, or just by actually pre-joining and writing the tables. That usually gets rid of a lot of the complexity that people need to do to understand how to work with the data. In healthcare specifically, claims data is a very, very star schema structure. And if you look at the actual backend systems, at least from a insurance company side, it can be up to 500 tables. that can get used for you to solve stuff. In the strategy and business decision world, though, from using like healthcare claims data, you can really narrow it down to about 6 tables, and you can pre-join all of those and pretty much have minimal duplication just by doing some pivoting of columns, and that's about it. So interoperable, it adheres usually to a common data model. We have an internal one at Kythera that we use, but it also is interoperable with other known common data models in the healthcare space, those being OMOP, FHIR, HL7. FHIR's built on HL7. But OMOP has been a really big thing that we've used recently. It's actually an open source framework that gets used primarily for electronic health record data. And because it's open source, it gets heavily used by the entire market. So version and audible as well. That usually means us maintaining pipelines over time. If the pipeline changes, it indicates either a new version of the pipeline, may not be a new version of the table, because we do incremental appends to it. So there's a difference on that front of adding data versus are you really creating a new version of a table. And there's usually a team or owner responsible for it, whether that's engineering or your analytics team is usually going to be more, at least for us, on the dashboard side, BI side of things, where our engineers really manage more of the pipelines. So data products are, at its core, packaged, reliable, and usable. If it's not one of those 3 things, if you don't want to give it to downstream teams or externally, it's probably not a data product. So some examples of what data products can be, or data as a product. Kind of the terms can get used interchangeably. Data as a product is more of a thought process. But examples can be dashboards. You can have chatbots that are not just, hey, interact with my data and answer anything. It's kind of purposely built to answer some questions. You see that with Databricks Genie Rooms. They're really kind of configured for a specific question that you're trying to answer. Or they can be curated tables, which usually deals with some level of remastering, some level of cleansing, kind of doing the medallion framework. Just data is going to be like a raw data dump. I don't consider that a data product. It may inform building one. An ad hoc analysis that you do just one time, send to somebody. It's not going to be something you manage as a product. It can be built off the products, single-use reports, and just non-version controlled systems. So I mean, I make dashboards for exploratory analysis all the time. It's not something that I maintain long-term. I usually try and delete them after the fact, because if somebody comes and looks at it, it's probably not up to date. So one thing I do want to go over is the difference of measuring data products versus software products. Most people, or if you've been in product, you really think of things from a software as a service standpoint. And the way that you measure KPIs for SaaS versus data is a little bit different. A good way I like to think about it, I don't know if anybody's worked in the restaurant industry before, but I kind of consider software as the front of house staff. So it's really your like servers that are interacting with tables and such, right? Like they are directly engaging with the users. They're getting feedback about how the food is, and you know, is this some item that sells a lot versus where your back of house is really focused on, do we need to order all of this, get it in, how many do we need to create this evening or whatever. You have your workflow of, you know, the kitchen staff is very different from your wait staff. So it's really kind of a very different model. You can also think of it as kind of a grocery store even. Analysis is going to be like your restaurant even is like a software product. The grocery store is your data, right? It's the things that make up the software. So some of the same KPIs apply for one versus another, but like with data, I don't really care about measuring session duration in Databricks for running a query, or for you doing your analysis. I care more about how many queries are you running, about how many tables, what columns are getting used the most, which ones aren't getting used. I had actually brought this up with somebody before, as I was prepping for this, who has a disdain for product surveys and teams when some, you know, in a software where some survey goes out where it's like, how can we improve the product? And she's like, I hate these. Why can't they just leave me alone? They made features that I like. Please just stop asking to give me new stuff. And I told her, from my perspective as a product, what I want to know is which features can I get rid of? Which can I drop? Which ones are not getting used? What am I supporting that I shouldn't be? And that's actually driven a lot of changes that I've done to our product tables at Kythera. I noticed a ton of columns that were almost null, that nobody was using, that I also had no idea how to use. So get rid of those. Or there were naming, just even naming of columns that did not make sense. For example, on a healthcare claim, you can have I think it's 7 different date columns that can all be used for different use cases. And we had a bunch of our users using, and one of these is on a prescription claim, they were trying to find the date the prescription was written versus the day, they were actually using the day that it was filled instead, which can be a much longer time if you have 3 prescriptions that you're going to the doctor for. That could be 3 months of time difference, and that was purely from a naming issue that caused with that. So kind of discovered that just from seeing how users were interacting with the data. So a few examples that we have on the healthcare side that we have at Kythera. Patient risk scoring, a lot of that is about how sick somebody is. What do they do? You can kind of read through these. The one I'll highlight is going to be our facility tiering work, provider directories. What that really is measuring where are providers, where are they working, how long have they worked somewhere, what facilities do they operate at, et cetera. What we realized with a lot of the analysis our customers were doing is just trying to get counts of how many surgeries does physician X do at this place. It was something that was really commonly getting used, and a few other volume just based queries. Our main claims table is over 20 billion records, and you can do a bunch of joins with that to provider directories. So these could be some pretty costly queries, or even they could be written in ways that could be very costly. So something that we added to our directory base was just a set of 5 tables for these that did pre-calculations that runs with every build that we do of the product. So that basically our users can now just go to an ancillary table and get the counts of numbers. So just a way of doing denormalization that doesn't have to have our users come up with the best way to do counts of things themselves. They're kind of just relying on how we say the best way to do it is, which in my opinion is best because we're the ones most familiar with the products. All right, so KPIs and user adoption. What do I mean by that? So I do consider user adoption to be a KPI that you can measure, but I think it is a very important one to kind of measure and look at things separately. Like I said, active users, top queries, this can be things. Active users in the state of a data product, I care more about that maybe from a dashboard that somebody's interacting with, not if they're in an IDE doing work. So query patterns, kind of talked about this with the facility directory work we had done, really measuring what are people commonly doing and how can we provide a new feature or new data product itself that solves for that. I will say AI has, Databricks specifically with AI in their systems tables have done a lot off this because you're able to actually see every query over history that users have run, and I can just write a simple AI summarize is literally the name of the function, and it will basically tell me what that query was about. So it's a really quick way for me to analyze what people are doing. Product reach, so we get asked this a lot, especially on the healthcare front of how good is your coverage of data. There's a lot of ways that you can define coverage. I don't know if you guys have ever thought about that, but when somebody says, how much coverage do you have? There's so many ways you can look to kind of look at your data coverage. We try and measure at least, how many patients do we have out of the total known universe of patients in the United States for a given year? What coverage do we have for that? It kind of indicates how good and filled our product is itself. So cost, this is going to be something I kind of put more on our engineering team. I'll do a little bit of analysis on this, but that's it. The highest cost amount's really going to be in our pipelines that run. But again, Databricks makes that relatively easy to see a trend of things off that front by using those systems tables. And then data freshness. So really, are things updating on the frequency you expect? Pipelines running the right way? Are they reliable? Et cetera. I'll go over some stuff Databricks has just come out with in beta that kind of, like I said, tweaked my presentation because it's better than anything I had really written up before. So the key areas that I really look at are going to be usage, cost, access for users, query execution, data lineage. Those are really kind of the core things. So for measuring usage and cost, I'll go to the next table. Usage and cost is really going to be the system billing usage is the name of the table. One thing I'll mention off this that you definitely need to do before you can access this is turn on the systems tables. I don't think they're on by default for everybody, so you may need whoever manages your instance to turn them on. For users, they're also not on for everyone, so maybe doing a permission group level if that's how you manage access. So for usage and cost, the system billing usage, what that has in it is going to have like the SKU costs and stuff based upon your compute that you're using or the SQL warehouse. And I think it stays up to date for what the current cost is. User access is going to be access audit. That really is kind of more for measuring session. Query execution, query history, and then table lineage will show you which tables are used to build other downstream ones. It's the same thing that comes up in the UI of the catalog in Databricks. If you're just exploring through the UI, you can click a lineage button and it shows you the sequence kind of for tables. You can use this a bit further to actually find column lineage. It's a little complicated to write it all the way out, but you can use it for that. So for the query history table, that's primarily what I use right now. So a few caveats with that. And the systems tables in general. You can't really see it with the text at the bottom, but the history of these systems tables only really goes back 6 months, and then it gets deleted. So if you want to be measuring this over time, you should be building some level of metric reporting that inserts into, that either creates the table and then you insert it on a frequency, or else you're going to lose greater than 6 months of history. So that's a really key thing. The other thing that shows up in the query history table is going to be a bunch of statements that I don't really care about. Show, describe, analyze, explain. And when I mean show, I mean if a user just in the UI clicks on a catalog and tries to look at the sample data, like that registers and shows up in that query history table. I do not really care about that. It's more how somebody's interacting with Databricks. It's not how they're interacting with my product so much. So I usually filter all those out, and I just down select to filtering by select, create, alter, update. I usually don't even look at alter or update. I'm really only looking at create and select. Another thing that shows up in the query history table is the application itself that executed the query. So what I mean is all the Databricks ones start with the word Databricks. So you see Databricks Catalog Explorer, which like I said is the button clicking around. Notebooks, alerts, and jobs. So you can filter each one of those, which is a really nice way to kind of aggregate what you're looking to measure. Custom applications, so that is actually like written endpoints that people will write. So those could be any name that you define. And then external connectors, so Sigma, Power BI, Google Apps Scripts, Tableau, keeps going on. It's the way that, I don't know if anybody has looked at the execution engine of like Power BI and how it writes queries versus the way a person writes it, but they're really, really long. So especially if I'm running one of those AI summarize things, I throw out all of the dashboard ones because they don't really make sense for a way a person would write a query. What I mean by that is like when you select, if you were selecting by like a free text field, it will say where name in and give you a list of like 1,000 different things. So it just doesn't mean much to me. It would if I'm like really trying to tell my analytics team to improve their dashboards, but that's really not the area I'm focused over. But it would be something I would analyze to then go to that team and be like, hey, you guys may want to improve the way that you configured the dashboard on the back end. It could use some improvements. Runtimes are long, et cetera. All right. So a few examples of things that we've done on our end. We get data every day. We have an ingestion process and a pipeline that runs. So that ingests probably about 10 million records of claims per day. We get it from 5 different sources, so 5 different pipelines that have to run. And the volume can kind of be normal or it can jump around. You see, I can't see the date specifically, but it's this guy right here. Gets a little bit low. The table at the bottom is actually integration that I use with my Gmail to give me the information that matters. Because just knowing that volume went down doesn't give me any actionable insight. I could just talk to our engineering team and be like, hey, volume looks down today. And they'll be like, okay, cool. What do you want me to do? Which I'm like, I don't know, fix it. But some of our vendors give us data, through either their S3 bucket or there's an SFTP. Sometimes there's alerting in a system that I have to log into to look at for them. But some of them actually just send me an email on an email thread. So I integrated our Gmail with Databricks to basically use the AI summary to just take their emails, summarize them, and then plot them by day on the same graph that I'm measuring volume. So I can see on this one, hey, there was a technical issue that caused a delay in pharmacy data. You can see at the top, this is our ARCS claims data. So it kind of identifies why the spike went down. It tells me who to go talk to, or at least it informs me that I should expect this, and again, inform downstream teams of that. Really interested to see where Databricks kind of goes on the Lakeflow Connect stuff. I know there's a focus on Google Drive integration right now. This had to use the Gmail server client, which would not really work through the Google Drive setup. So had to create a Google app script for that. That's where you saw me tracking that and one of the other runs below. So I actually track the way that this runs separately. It's funny to measure KPIs of data products. You almost have to build another data product to measure your data product if you're not picking up on that already. So anomaly monitoring is something new that I think is in beta on Databricks. This is where things that I had to tell me what time like a table updated or such, I switched it to just start using this. Anomaly monitoring is done at the schema level. So to enable this, you basically, in Databricks, you go to the catalog, click on the schema you want, and it's on the details tab, and it's called anomaly monitoring. You just turn it on. Note with that, I think it defaults to run every 6 hours, which is a lot more frequent than I care about for monitoring some of this stuff. If you had, live streaming jobs and things that were running, totally makes sense. But for me, everything's a daily update at most, so it doesn't really matter. But what you can see on this at the bottom, it's a little hidden, is it shows the freshness of a table. The red says unhealthy, the green says healthy. There's another one that's called unknown. And it tells you when it evaluates it. So based off the frequency that it runs, the anomaly monitoring starts to dynamically figure out over time when should it expect the tables to be updated. So this is a whole thing Databricks has, run-ins using machine learning, all the fancy things I don't truly understand about. So it actually gives me a reason on the far side, and it tells me when it expected the table to be updated and that it hasn't updated at that cadence. So really handy on that front. This is there's a dashboard that automatically gets built in AI/BI the moment you turn on anomaly detection, so it's immediately there for you to go look at. But also a table is created in that schema that is your it's called quality monitoring summary, and it's called that for any schema you turn this on in. But it has all these metrics written to that table. So I haven't got to fully look at it yet, but that's a whole set of data that I could use to build more data products or reporting of the data products. So kind of same as like the systems tables, but a whole different look at this that's also applying some of Databricks' new features to it. So I'm really kind of excited to look at that. You also notice there's 2 tabs at the bottom. So one of them is the quality overview, others the table quality details. If I got enough time, I'll actually open up our instance and I can show you guys just what that looks like real quick. Table insights, this is not really a dynamic way of looking at the data, but it's directly in the UI. It's probably where I really started. When I said that we renamed some of our tables and that I also renamed some of the columns and that I dropped certain tables, that really came about from just using this view when it first came out. So this is for our medical submitted claims data product. And I can basically see how often is something getting hit over time. This is a subset of my own table off it that's built off the main table, so I don't see nearly as many queries as are actually running. But you can see the frequent users of the table show up here, so I can just see who's hitting it the most. Tells me any dashboards or notebooks that are connected to it. This one doesn't currently have any that are connected to that table. And then also what are the most common joins, transformations that happen, and then further down it also has what like actual queries that are getting run, and it says like the most frequent ones, and you can just kind of scroll through and look at it, see who ran it. It's a little prettier to look at than just that system table. You can also click, I think, one over on those tabs, and it shows you the lineage, which, like I said earlier, maps to the lineage table in systems, but it kind of gives you a dynamic. I can keep clicking a button, seeing what it's all upstream, see what's all downstream. All right, so this came about from, I'll let this run real quick, and then I'll actually try and do it live. But we actually met with one of the Databricks folks. Her name's Jen. She's right here. A few weeks ago, and she did a demo for us about how to use the AI agent flow and stuff in Databricks, which to me was crazy intuitive. I write a lot of UDFs in Databricks and a lot of UDTFs, all in SQL because you can register them to Unity Catalog, but you can just add them to tools on these playground bots like really fast. Now granted, like I would need to give this to our machine learning team to go further with, but all I did for this table, and I'll try and actually get a look here, is real quick, I asked the question just, who is the top user last month in our data? And so it ends up telling me that Lance has run the most queries over the last month. And I'm like, cool, that was really handy. And granted, this is built with 2 functions that are basically just pulling the tables from system tables, no prompting, nothing like that front. And then I asked what he basically looked at. And it tells me he's doing pharmaceutical claims analysis, working with OMOP, and then doing some patient journey analysis, which is exactly what I actually know he's working on. The guy's been doing a ton of work over the last month, building out our actual OMOP, common data model framework. So it totally aligns with what I would expect him to actually be doing. Let me see if I can actually show how that is to build, because I did this 2 days ago and it maybe took me 5 minutes. All right, cool. Everyone can see this, right? We'll zoom in a bit. All right, so the first thing I do to get here, or to make this work, is basically just creating a notebook, and I'm gonna go ahead and set just my catalog and schema, and I'm creating 2 functions. So one of them is just getting the daily query metrics. So this is literally, it's taking that system query history table, I'm getting rid of the show and describe, and just giving the application that ran, so that's what tells me Power BI or Sigma or notebooks, whatever. Executed by, I'm splitting the executed by just the @ sign because it's people's email, so it gives me the domain. If I got people in multiple domains, easy way to filter out kind of the customer account. And then start time, it's in a time. I just care about things from a date level. And then I'm just doing counts of statements and sessions. Session count, again, it gets a little weird with the Power BI things, and all I've seen like massive counts off that, so I just kind of don't consider that at the moment for any of the dashboard things. There's probably a way to get to that, which I just haven't figured out yet. And then another one is getting the actual table metrics themselves by the executor. So this is how I ask the question, what has Lance done is going to be running this one. It's a lot longer. I do a few things to try and parse out the statement itself. So if anybody wants to talk to me about this afterwards, feel free. I'm happy to share any of this with anybody. It's not anything really proprietary. It's just messing with these tables. So I'll just real quick run these two. And because this is live, things will take a second. We've tried to use the biggest thing I can to run this. You can see its name is Big Beefy Boy. Another fun fact, you are able to put emojis in your cluster and warehouse names, and even tables. So have fun with that. And then I'm just going to go over to this playground section. And all I'm going to do is go to tools right here. And I'm just going to add the get table executed by metric. And I'll just add the other one I made, which is get table queries. Cool. And I went ahead and wrote up this little prompt. We'll start with this top one. So just who was my top user last month? It's a little different every time, so we'll see if it actually asks me some clarifying questions or not. Immediately say, to get this, I need to run this query. Cool. I'm good with that. Something definitely to refine off this would be actually adding a prompt at the bottom. I just kind of wanted to see how this would perform out of the box as far as answers it could give me. So the first thing that comes back here is literally this massive table of, basically the returned metrics from that function. So when it ran, who ran it, statement count per day, etc. I apparently ran a lot that day. And we'll keep going down. And then I've noticed that it doesn't do a great job actually doing like after the fact metrics and measuring. So you can see here it's an empty output. So I figured out I just needed to refine this further. Again, prompting would probably do a good bit here. So I'll just ask the clarifying question of which user ran the most queries in May of 2025. Okay, and so it's saying it can analyze by user from the data. I can see entries in May of 2025, tells me how it did it. So I started by doing just year and month. Let me sum the statements, and it tells me the top users. And so we see here as of May, it's Scott New. So, and then it also gives me details on some system accounts. I mean, honestly, it's just giving me really good information about what's even going on in the system. And then I can just ask a clarifying question here for what kind of statements did Scott run in May? And we'll see how this does from a analyzing session. right, this is what you get for doing it live, right? It's not my friend. We'll see if I can get it to do the thing with Lance again. But either way, the fact that I am as like just a product management person with a little bit of SQL can write something and immediately start asking questions like this really kind of blew my mind that I was able to do that so fast. It probably bothers a lot of the machine learning and data science people that want to measure this over time and how well is it reporting and like all those things, but that's on them to figure out. I figured this is a really good way for me to bridge the gap of what do they need to do versus what I'm looking for. And that's where I've probably found like the best work with machine learning folks, like data scientists, like the best value they get out of me is just seeing how I interact with what they build and how I'm trying to solve, like what kind of questions am I trying to solve? It's the context that they miss when they're building things. And this to me helps bridge a lot of that gap. It lets me think a little bit more about really what do I care about before I either write up a ticket for them or like a feature request or whatever. Just very handy on that front. All right. I will show you those two other tables or the two dashboards real quick. The one for the anomaly detection and data quality monitoring. Like I said, you have to so you do have to input on this logging table name. Like I said, it's at the schema level. So it has to run off one of the schemas that you care about. And then you have to actually put in that monitoring table, which is quality monitoring summary. Yeah, there we go. And so then it just immediately pulls back the data from there. I've talked to the product managers of this. They're looking to kind of make this a little more dynamic, or all the data quality monitoring actually go into a system table. So right now it's registered at the schema level, but they're looking to kind of handle that in some way. I think they had said doing it in the systems catalog level, or there may be another way they're looking at, but they're looking to make this easier as either a drop down or something like that that you can just use. But yeah, like I said, you can see healthy tables, unhealthy tables over time. You're able to just filter. Like I said, this is out of the box. The moment you click monitoring on, it takes a little bit to run the job, and then you immediately have this dashboard to play with. And so I can see here the evaluated time, the status, how many impacted queries are hit by this potential unhealthy status, which is really cool to me to actually see impact tables and impacted queries. And then, like I said, the freshness itself. So if I like really zoom in, table was predicted to be updated at 12/5, April 23rd, but it was last updated on the 5th. That makes sense to me. This is not the schema and table I'm using are not a data product. This is something I build ad hoc. So, and probably did it a few times, and that's where it came up with its measurement. It's also got the table quality details over here. So this is where you're actually able to do further research at the table level. I can't remember off the top of my head which tables I have in here. So yeah, all right. So future with Databricks AI, the things I'm really looking into, let's switch back, are going to be using the AI agents more, looking at the anomaly detection, really digging more into what's happening with the Lakehouse Federation connectors. Would really like to kind of sync that up to some of the Salesforce work. I could really start actually measuring our accounts versus what gets used. So been trying to dig into that a bit. They announced it last year at the Databricks conference and kind of came out a little bit after that. So been playing with that. And then there's also, same as the anomaly detection, there's a new thing called custom data classifications, or data classifications at the catalog level, which right now is really based around like PII and personal health information, just auto-classifies columns that way. But you're going to be able to set up custom classifiers that it can auto-detect. So looking for that as well. It's going to help me more upstream on what I use to build data products. And yeah, so thank you, everybody.